Hi, I'm Dan McFadyen, co-founder and managing director at Edalex. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Julian Ridden. Julian is the head of growth for Australia at Quizizz. Julian's experience spans working at educational institutions, LMS providers Moodle and Instructure, as well as other edtech providers. He is an educator, keynote speaker, product leader, and lifelong learner. Julian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. As you know, I hate these intro bios, but thank you for putting that together. It makes me sound a little bit competent, and for that, I'm appreciative. Thank you.
Always. I'm here to help, and that's part of my friendship and service. So to contextualize, you and I both met. It seems a few lifetimes ago for both of us, quite a few years ago, and we do often catch up, as we were joking earlier, at conferences. So at your booth or my booth, and so it's great to connect again today. Now, you're currently the head of growth for Australia at Quizizz. So tell us about Quizizz and your focus there.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And first of all, I just want to let you know, I think anybody who listens to this who works in the EdTech space will appreciate this next quote. I always refer to EdTech as the Hotel California, because we try to check out, but we can never leave. So we might be, back at the coalface or in a different organization, but yeah, it's great that, as I said, we've known each other for so long, and there are so many people who has been 15, 20 years, and every time I see them, they're just in a new position or a new company or a new school. But yes, we never seem to be able to escape. So yeah, look, thank you for the opportunity. I'll talk very briefly about Quizizz. Quizizz is a company that provides formative assessment tools, very heavily focused around gamification for the K-12 space, although we have a few universities using it as well. But I'll be honest, one of my key reasons for joining it is they're very heavily invested in the AI side of things. And I think they're doing it in a very clever way, which again, I'm very keen as we talk about today, what is good use of AI, bad use of AI and risks. So we'll kind of touch back on that. But yeah, look, my role here is that this is a company that's had huge success in the US. They kind of launched accidentally at the right time, just in time for COVID, where digital technology and especially tools to engage students remotely was, really huge. And at the moment, they're used. I think I have to please apologize up front. When I say I've recently joined, it has only been this year, so I've got to get my data right. But they're used in about 8 out of 10 US schools. And look, we're doing a big global launch, and I've been brought on board to help get us started in the Australian market, which is very exciting. So yeah, that's what we're doing here.
Brilliant, fantastic. So in that bio that I cobbled together for you, it shares some of only, and it actually doesn't do you justice, but you've worked at a range of different educational institutions, including colleges, both Moodle as well as Instructure, a number of other companies. And one thing that's really shown throughout is your passion for teaching and learning. And I'd say over the past year, what's really come to the fore is around AI and how AI can, how we can weave that into education for potentially incredible impact. So let's start to narrow in on that. So why AI and education? Do they mix, and why do they? If so, why do they mix together so well?
This will surprise you none the least when I say I want to take a bit of a rambly response to that answer. So I actually think this. I think this is important.
Time's up. Great. It was a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Matt Damon. We'll see you next week. No, there's an obscure reference for those who pick up that one. No, the reason for the slightly rambly answer is people look at using EdTech, educational technologies, for different reasons. Sometimes it's because we have to do everything online because of distance education, or things like COVID. But for most of us, we use e-learning tools to augment our face-to-face practice. We're trying to increase an efficiency or an engagement or something like that. And the reason I take the slight rambly answer is you mentioned that you've always been drawn to the passion I have. Yeah, for me, EdTech has been about a passion of how do we deliver more quality education at scale. And that, for me, has always been the driver. Now, that's much easier said than done. In the early days, I'd like to say early days, I think many people are still guilty of this. But, we go, oh, we have an LMS, and we throw 15 PDFs up in a quiz and go, we're doing e-learning.
Yes, right.
Like all things, what was it? Savage from Mythbusters quite famously once said, every tool's a hammer. You can look at a problem and every tool's a hammer. The LMS became that. But the reason for me for the ramble is good ed tech really does actually help us with this problem of quality at scale. When we're looking at, lecture theatres, we've got a higher student to teacher count than ever before. How do we provide quality? Well, maybe we can put more things online. How do I better support those who need support, be it academically, neurodiversity, physically, whatever those needs are? Well, maybe I can use online tools to provide better differentiation and better support. And that, for me, has what's always driven me to the EdTech space, which is we can use these tools to provide quality at scale if we do it right, to allow us to augment. And I'm going to say the word classroom, but it could be a university lecture theatre or a K-12. So the reason I start with that preamble is that what has really excited me genuinely about the generative AI space. Here are tools that are built to understand context in language. At its core, that's what we're seeing with generative AI. And then, of course, we're going to talk about all the ways it's expanded from that. But the ability for me as an educator who is time poor, who is trying to focus on my educational outcomes, to say, actually, here's a tool that can genuinely save time, but allow me to create, to remix, to differentiate, to research, or even to provide tools for my students that will allow them to do the same. That really is a significant shifting moment for us. And we will spend the next half hour talking about, the benefits of that, the risks of that. Like, there is so much to unpack. Right. But at its core, that's what excites me about the Gen AI movement. It is really the next stepping stone into how we can provide quality at scale and how we can use computing power potentially to help us reach that goal.
Brilliant. And you've been, as you've investigated various technologies, you've been great in terms of sharing that on LinkedIn and elsewhere. And I recall a few videos where you said, my mind has just been blown by the latest technology, and then a couple months pass, and I'm like, that's ancient history, and now look at what this new tech can do. So Gen AI is moving so quickly. There's so many. Yeah, we obviously hear about the big names like ChatGPT and OpenAI, but there's so much else happening out there. So how, and you and I focus on EdTech for a living, but how do teachers, parents, administrators, how should they keep up? How can they keep up? Yeah.
I'd like you to throw the easy questions out first. Thanks for that. I appreciate that.
And world peace is up next, so just a heads up. So
yeah. No, look, my honest and genuine response is a combination of I don't know, and yet also it's a bit easier than we think, which is a weird fence to try and sit on between those two lines. The speed of movement has been astronomical. It is really weird to think that, again, AI has been around for years. This is not a new thing. We talk about AI as a new thing, but we've been using AI for Grammarly. Grammarly is a wonderful example of a text-based AI that has helped save many of my emails from being dog's breakfast for years. We look at Apple Maps, Google Maps. We've had AI and data-centered AI tools for over a decade in active use. It's been around since the 70s. What changed November a year ago? So again, it's really important to kind of put this date on it. It has now been, 13, 14 months since OpenAI released this little product that even they had themselves to come up going, we didn't think it would have that big an impact. But where they went and released a product that suddenly made the world take notice of what generative AI could do, and we'll unpack that just a second. But when the world suddenly kind of grasped onto this and went, wow, that's the capability of these tools, what we have seen in that last 13, 14 months of growth has been astronomical. Every day there's another 5 new tools. Of those 5 new tools, 4 of them are remixes, reused ideas, but maybe one of them just changes everything. So how do we keep up? Get back to your question. If you're lucky to be people like you and I, we are in the networks. We are. I'm looking at my LinkedIn's, but I have set up numerous feeds and searches, and yes, I'm using AI to help me do it. That helped me keep track of what's going on and to filter through, try and separate that wheat and the chaff. But we are unique. We are special individuals, and I don't say that to make ourselves sound extra special, but we have that time and experience, and it's kind of comes part of our jobs. The good news is, though, and this is where I go from saying, hey, it's really hard and there's so much coming through, but education networks are built to share quality data, and be it organizations like Theta and Ascolite in the higher ed, organizations like Mighty here in Australia in the K-12 space, and Vine and others like that, educators are already getting together and going, hey, not only have I found this cool new tool, but this is how I'm using it for my educational practice. And for educators, all I can say is connect with your networks. You'll be absolutely amazed at what your peers are doing, and that's how you can get yourself up to speed. Let someone else do the work.
Yeah.
But engage in that community of practice. And in that last, again, I keep saying year and a half, 14 months. Let's just kind of average it to year and a half for the sake of argument. In that time, we have seen so many different educational communities kind of grappling with and wrangling with and pulling apart and putting back together, and now starting to have coherent views and coherent thoughts on AI. And I think that really is a magic point that as we come into 2024, that those networks really are providing huge value to those inside of them.
Well said. And I think, I want to pull on that thread. I was fortunate enough to join a thought leadership group of school principals, senior teachers, and other leaders, and from coming from low socioeconomic background, and it was interesting, hearing one individual profess their ignorance and fear. I don't know what it is, to someone else who's actually circumventing the state restriction on banning AI, because they know that's where the students are doing when they get home. So and to really bring them into that world, and it just as with any technology, Gen AI can be used for good or bad, or anywhere in between. And so a lot of the initial reaction was, oh, well, we don't understand it yet. Let's just ban it. And then we don't, then it goes, not that it goes away, but let's study it and figure it out. And then.
Well, actually, let me go back to that statement. I want to repack that a little bit, though, because I actually want to make sure this is actually a hill I will die on. I will often defend those who have to do academic or IT decisions at enterprise levels, because they're always the ones who cop the brunt of, AI just came out and a Department of Education New South Wales just went, oh, we're banning it. These are actually really important responses, because when you're doing it at enterprise level, when you have tens of thousands, if not more, students under your care, we do need to be at least more aware. Where I won't die on the hill, but what I've been really pleased and grateful to see how Australia has handled it is those bans weren't there to say we're going to, because I pick up the quote, I know you're saying it jokingly, but we're going to ban it until it goes away. That actually hasn't been how Australia has dealt with it. It's we're banning it until we get a better understanding of risk, and then we're going to slowly release. Now, this is incredibly irritating for the coalface, and I feel for you, and I have been that person who happily circumvents those processes. I'm not here to advocate for that. But the reason I do think it's important to recognize that, when these things are going so fast, let's talk about the most famous example that happened in the first couple of months of ChatGPT. Someone at Samsung decided to upload all this private corporate data into the GPT because they were going to do some really cool evaluation with it, not realizing that the terms and conditions very openly stated that anything shared into here would become part of the model, and that data then suddenly became open. The person at Samsung didn't intentionally choose to make that decision. The ChatGPT wasn't doing that, but no one had quite understood how the tool worked yet. So that's why I just kind of interrupted. So I think it's important that when we have these levels of bureaucracy, that yes, we do ban, but the where things happen for better or for worse is either they ban till it goes away, which we all know there are organizations of that ilk. They are the ones that we try to avoid, but ones that have quickly tried to move to understand. And in Australia, the speed of the Department of Education, even the speed of our universities who are renowned for I will never name this person, but years ago, I worked for a university here in Sydney. I got pulled into a DVC's office where I was being berated for my job performance, and I was horrified. And I was sat down, and this is the exact words, I kid you not. Julian, there is the speed of universities and the speed of icebergs, and I shouldn't have to tell you which is faster. I was being berated for speed. Now, we don't ever want to get back to those worlds. But universities who are renowned for not working at speed have done incredible things. And I will highlight University of Sydney, Macquarie University, Hong Kong University, have been doing fantastic things. So yeah, again, I know it's a slight segue, but yeah, I do think it's important that slowing down in this world is critical importance. And as we talk about risks, I want to dive back into that a bit more. But yeah, doing it until it goes away, well, that's a different story altogether, and we'll let those people. Darwinian evolution will take care of itself.
Well said, and that's fantastic clarification there. And I think as you've said, with time now, at least here in Australia, we now have the Australian framework for generative AI in schools. So there's been the thought, the planning, and so a number of the blanket bans have now been loosened. And certainly when we're talking about primary or secondary school children, especially, privacy and security has to be paramount there.
Absolutely.
So with this evolution, do you think they're getting it right? This balance of access and control and safety. Yeah.
Look, I look to the sky because I don't think there is an answer for that. I think that overall we're being cautious, and I think that is a correct response. As a person who is an AI advocate, anybody who has followed my LinkedIn feed, I apologize for the ongoing onslaught of, oh my God, check out this fantastic tool that you see on my feed. Right. But now, as an advocate and as a high user of these tools, I have been very glad to see the cautious nature of approach. But that being said, that there is good caution, and then there's kind of an overzealous caution. And in some markets overseas, we've seen that. In Australia, I think we have struck a relatively strong balance. Another piece of interesting history, most people don't know this, it was only in the late, I think it was 2003, people who watch this after the fact can Google the exact date, it was only in the early 2000s that Australian law made it legal to record TV onto a VCR. We have had this tool in the 1970s and the 1980s. It was literally only in the 2000s that copyright law caught up. How can legal statute and policy possibly keep up with change? And that's before, the VCR was around for 20 odd years before that finally got, everybody was doing it. No one was being charged, but it didn't change that the law took this long to catch up. The law around AI, how do you have a chance of catching up when the tool is evolving on literally a daily basis? So again, I rambled, but I think that's why caution's important. Right. When you're got no chance of your law keeping up, and law protects society, right? In theory. But if the laws that protect you can't keep up, then caution is warranted to make sure that, we are doing mitigated risk. And I think that's the word you're going to hear me use a lot. It's not about risk. Every tool has risk. The internet has risk. Right. My computer has risk. My dog has risk. But it's all about what's the mitigated risk versus reward. And I think we're doing that well in this country at the moment.
Great. And so with that context, how should an institution be it a school or a university or RTO, some other provider? How should they approach AI?
All right. Look, again, the old adage is true, is that there is no right answer to this question, but there are many wrong ones. So let's talk about the wrong ones first. Now, it's a weird way of positioning it, but it's true. So here's the wrong way to look at it. The wrong way to look at it is go, oh, wow, I found this website. There's an AI for that, which, by the way, awesome website. Check it out. And every day it's telling me 15 new tools that I can check out. So I'm going to go and load all of these tools and play with all of them. Do not go down that rabbit hole of, I have just walked into a Bunnings of AI and I'm going to go down every aisle and just buy everything and see what's going to happen. Right. you joke that way, it makes it obvious why that's a bad methodology. You don't quite know what you're playing with. You don't know what it is you're trying to solve. You're getting caught by the shiny. You're being caught by a marketing message, and you don't understand risk. That's why just grabbing random tools, I would never advocate. The good way of doing it is think about the problems that you're trying to solve first. What is a problem that you have that an AI could potentially help you solve? Oh, I really want to take this resource and differentiate it because I've got 3 students I have various neurodiversity needs and I need things explained in different ways. I don't normally have time to rewrite this resource in 3 different ways. Maybe that's something that an AI could help me with. I really want to go multimodal. I want to be able to take my written form because I'm not good at speaking, which is obviously not me. I'm saying this as if I was somebody else. Where speaking is my weakness. No, but not everybody does. So, wait a second. There are AIs that can take the written word and turn it into now a human sounding voice. Maybe that's a problem that you can solve. Please always focus on what is the challenge that you are trying to solve. Out of that, okay, great. What are some AI tools that may be able to help you? And that's where you start your exploration. The last thing is that you don't have to be the first. Being the first is a skill set that not everybody has. Being the first is someone who's going to be the first is someone who is actually able to take their passion for what they're doing, but to also put that aside and to critically think about risk. What is the pro and con of this? And if that is you listening to this, awesome, please be that person, but then share. And that's where we start this conversation. If you are not that person who's good at being the first and you recognize that you get caught up in that shiny thing, which again, not a criticism, like that is an awesome thing that you get passionate and you want to explore, but then go to your networks, find the networks where you can then go, all right, I found this really cool thing. I think this really solved my problem. Can you help me verify that this is not going to have issues? And I don't know if you'd be willing to let me segue a little bit off our script, because I think this is where we should talk about what are the issues of AI, because I think some are obvious and some are not.
Please. Yeah.
So when we talk about risks of AI, everybody first of all talks about, it hallucinates. And for those of you who are still catching up on terminology, hallucination is an interesting word. It's when the AI didn't know, so the AI just made it up, but it states it as fact. We always like to throw this company under the bus. They have fixed it since then, but this was the first high-profile case when Google launched Bard on a big keynote stage and live streaming it out to the world. They asked Bard, what discovered. I think the exact question was like along the lines of, what discovered the first exoplanet, and it mentioned how the James Webb Telescope did this. It didn't. It completely made up the result, but presented it as fact, and that fact was then continued by the speaker, who of course isn't an astrophysicist, who then went, see, look how awesome Bard is. So when we talk about hallucination, and that's one that everybody talks about, so I won't hop on about it, it's just when an AI, it's a computer, it's going to be right. No, it won't. But the next risks are actually a lot more subtle and a lot more dangerous. So when we talk about Gen AI, generative AI, it's been trained on how things work. It's been trained on data sets to be able to find patterns. If I was to try and explain it in the simplest of terms, if I was to say, hey, here is a ladybug and here is a red Volkswagen, and said, how are these two things similar? Well, if I was to have an XY plot, I can go, well, these are colors, and this is organic to non-organic. They're both red, so they map here, but they're on different ends of the spectrum. And we call these vertices, right? When you look at AI, it's not an XY vertices. We're looking at 500, 800. In fact, each new AI is actually able to add now thousands of vertices. That when I'm combining these two things, it now understands exactly how there is context between these two objects. And this is what makes Gen AI so effective, because as I'm now typing in my very badly typed, grammatically incorrect, usually tonally inconsistent sentence, it's able to take that garbage, refactor it, understand it as a question, turn it into a proper question in its own terms, and provide me an answer. That is what generative AI is doing. And that's why when you're asking it to say, hey, make this sound like somebody else, it knows what that somebody else sounds like. But how? Because there was data it was trained on. So why do I make a big deal about the data? Well, many of our AIs were trained on a wonderful, even-keeled, balanced, clean data source called the internet.
got to believe
And
everything that's on the internet, right, Julian? It's yeah.
yeah, and it's terrifying because, internet, as we all know, is full of fantastic information and incredibly scary information. And different AIs have tried to fix that by balancing, going, we're only training on these data sources, but all of these data sources present different bias. Now, as a teacher, I have inherent bias. Dan, as a speaker, you have inherent bias. It comes from us. It is who we are. It comes from the environment, the culture, the situation that we are in. But the good thing about that is only person impacted by my bias is my students, and that's thankfully a small subset. The only people impacted by your bias, people who listen to you talk, which is even a smaller no, I'm going to say that. You've got a wonderful, wonderful audience. So, but we all know the joke I'm trying to make here. But when you look at the internet, what we've been seeing, and some of the early tests were done with things like DALL-E. DALL-E is an image generation tool, and a professor out of Hong Kong University, again, the name escapes me, my apologies, but if you go research this, you find the presentation up on YouTube. He went into Bing, which is Microsoft's public version of ChatGPT, and it's connected to DALL-E. And what this professor asked is, said, present me a picture of something beautiful that the world hasn't seen before. And it was nothing but images of landscapes and beautiful women, which, by the way, is our first bias. Is it negative? Comes down to definition of beautiful, definitions of sexism, but okay. The terrifying was the other end of the spectrum, where he rewrote the same question to say, present me something scary that nobody has seen before. And it was kind of pictures of like dark houses and a clown and a smiling African-American male. What we see here, and so when we talk about risk, and that's why it brings down this first rabbit hole, is the rabbit hole of bias. When you're dealing with a tool that you're expecting it to generate responses in text, or these days, video, oral, visual form, it is going to be provided with the inherent biases on the data that it came from, and you don't know what that data is. So that's the first more subtle risk to talk about. The second subtle risk is your data security. And I brought this up as our very first example, and this is nowhere near where it needs to be right now. In fact, one of the reasons that I do use AI a lot, and I use AI on my laptop. Open source has fantastic tools. I'm using a whole bunch of AIs that aren't web connected, that happen purely on my MacBook, so nothing goes out to the web. Why? Because it means that when I'm feeding it, and I'm feeding it corporate data, I use it day to day in my job here at Quizizz. I promised Dan before we started talking here that, I hate bios, but you know what? I'm just going to put my CV in and get it to generate me an intro for this. So when you go, if you've come to this because you've read the website and thought, Julian sounds really interesting, yes, a GPT wrote that. I'll take no credit. But again, the point I want to make here is that the data you provide, what is happening with that data? Now, OpenAI have very openly said that all data is used to train the system. And it was only just last month. And if you're not aware of this, please go to their website. You can now actually fill out a form to state that I do not want my data being used to train. But unless you go and you fill out that form and you submit it, the default position is data is there. Just before Christmas, I did a presentation at a university where I did a live demonstration on the screen where I was actually able to find somebody else's CV by talking to ChatGPT-4. And not only was I able to find someone's CV, I was then able to get their personal information. I got their email address, their phone number, their postal address, because they had put all of this into ChatGPT to probably help them with a job application or maybe to rewrite something. But that data became part of a data set that by asking the right questions, I was able to pull up in front of an audience, which, by the way, I regret doing because I didn't actually expect to be that successful. So that's the second risk. Please be aware of what's happening, not just with the data you're getting, hallucination, but what's happening with the data that you're putting into it. And are you feeling safe with that? Those are two areas I think people don't think enough about: bias and data security. The last thing on data security, and then I'll pass back to you, but is what's already happened is we're now seeing more and more AIs being able to be connected. OpenAI started this by going, we've connected ours to the web. It can search the web for you. Yeah. And again, it acted like a year 5 student who, when you ask them a question, it went, Google, the first 3 responses will be accurate. Yeah, I'll take that. And yes, it's getting better, but it's just connected to the internet. But nowadays, you can now connect lots of your apps, you can connect Gmail to an AI. You can connect Microsoft have released Copilot, which is again connected to their own form of what they call an isolated GPT. It's on their own Azure servers, so it's not leaking your data out. Again, do your research, but Microsoft are doing a really good job on this. But when you start going, oh, I'm going to connect this thing to the AI. Oh, I'm going to connect my school data set to an AI.
Yeah.
Do you really know what's happening with that data?
Right.
So those are the things that we should be thinking about. Yes, what is it going to present to our students? That's rather obvious, but think about your data and think about the biases inherent in the system, because both those things are way more dangerous than I think most people realize.
Yeah. Wow. Very, very thought-provoking, and yeah, and I would echo those concerns.